So today's presentation is freezer magic. So we're going to talk about different ways you can put your freezer to use, and different foods you can find frozen and how to use them, things you can freeze, and the food safety issues associated with that. I'll start by introducing myself again. My name is April Byron. I'm a registered dietitian. My background is working with children and young families at WIC, as well as counseling people with diabetes. But really, for the most part, it's been this sort of community wellness work that I do. So this presentation is a little bit near and dear to my heart right now, because it's kind of that time of year where things are in season, and I'm doing a lot of this at home. Trying to get some things packed away for busy months ahead, busy weeks and months ahead. So as a mom of 2 small children, 9 months and 3 years, my dinner time's chaotic. So these techniques have really helped me out. So as you can see here is an example of somebody who has stocked their freezer full of meals that are ready to go. I'm assuming this is a blogger. I don't anticipate anybody walking out of this presentation and going home and doing this over the weekend. But, you know, we'll learn some things today. Okay. So when it comes to, you know, the freezer and food in general, we all have the best of intentions. We've all done it. Something's on sale. Okay, I'm going to bulk up. Oh, I'm going to get some of this and use it up, or I'm going to buy all these veggies and fruits and whole grain rice, brown rice, and then a lot of it ends up going to waste. You know, you get this new bread that you didn't finish, and it gets moldy. So there's the freezer can really help us out to avoid just throwing foods out because we purchased too much or weren't really prepared to use it all at that time, or couldn't buy a smaller amount, which we've all seen before. So we'll review some foods that freeze, some food safety around freezing your food, some of the benefits of freezing, how to use these things every day. We'll even look at some prepackaged frozen dinners and meals, lunches. I'm sure that some of you have gone that route, maybe have one in the fridge right now. And then we'll just have questions and review at the end. So just about anything can be frozen. Eggs in the shells, not so much. Canned foods, like the whole can, you're not going to put that in the freezer. But most foods with certain processes and techniques can be frozen. And even the canned foods, you can take it out of the can and freeze it. It's not, the food itself can be frozen. Eggs are a bit tricky when they're uncooked. So, but cooked eggs can typically be frozen. And it's very easy to freeze a number of these things. I think I talked even about it a little bit last time. Like the fruit we see here, you're just going to want to lay that on a cookie sheet after it's been washed and dried, freeze it, all spread out, and then put it in a bag. Yeah, food service refers to that as IQF, individually quick frozen. This also works for like beans. So if you open a can of beans or you cook a bag of beans and you have all kinds of extra, you can do the same thing. So, and then ideally you just don't want those clumps because they're hard to work with. And I think we also talked about how you can freeze fresh herbs in olive oil. And you probably could freeze it in water or even without the liquid at all. I think the olive oil just maintains the flavor better. Since we're using herbs for flavor, it's probably the best approach. So some things that freeze well at home, leftovers. So if you make a big casserole and it's only just you or 1 or 2 of you, you can go ahead and cut your casserole up into portions, wrap it up real tight, and get it in the freezer. And then you have, basically, you made your own microwave frozen dinner right there. So that's an easy one. You can also make double batches of things. So you plan on having leftovers and stick the whole dish in the freezer. This is a good one with soups, casseroles, even, you know, you can even freeze meats that are cooked. So I recently made lasagnas this way. I just layered everything up and stuck it in the freezer and didn't cook it.
Oh, you didn't cook it?
I didn't cook one. I had plans already for dinner and I wanted to get some things in the freezer, so that was easy. If, you know, for whatever reason that worked to be easy for me that day. Some other things that are easy to freeze are breakfast items. So we have a picture of it later on, but you can actually freeze pre-made breakfast sandwiches. Right now, I have some kind of veggie breakfast burritos in my freezer. Those are a good one. You can freeze waffles and pancakes. So a lot of breakfast foods are very easy to freeze. You can freeze like a frittata, so you have a ready-to-go omelet in the morning, sort of like an egg muffin. That's an easy one. Meats, I think we all know we can freeze meat. Probably have meat in our freezers right now. So we all know that we can, I think everyone knows you can freeze meats. The one trick that I think works really well is to marinate your meat before you freeze it. So you can go ahead and buy them in bulk, get some freezer bags, put, you know, your chicken breasts in with whatever marinade you like to make, and then you have, when you thaw it, it's ready to go in the oven or on the grill. You don't have to think about how I'm going to flavor it after it's ready.
Yeah, we usually buy a lot of chicken breast at once
Yeah.
and pound it down.
Yep.
Because my husband didn't like chicken breast till I taught him if you pound it down, it doesn't take as long to cook and
Yeah.
then it doesn't get dried out. So we pound it down and then we freeze it. So
You could do that too.
And then put never thought about the marinade.
Yeah, you can marinate it, stick it in the freezer.
That is a good idea.
Yeah, I have a whole bunch of servings of chicken in my freezer right now. So all marinated, ready to go. And I mean, I've even have done things where I put like a whole soup together and in a bag and put that in the freezer. And you just add broth and cook it. So
I
you can
went
do that
to
with meat.
winter squash goes down at Blackie's Market in Auburn, 37 cents a pound. And I buy 10 pounds of it and then I roast it and then I freeze it. Because I love that squash. I'm not paying $1.29 a pound.
No,
It's
and
awful.
you know, doing all of that, breaking down all of that squash at once. I mean, if you're gonna break down one squash, what's two? What's three? You know, at that
I
point.
do 2 big pans of it at once.
Yeah, exactly.
You roast it, take it out, and then you just scoop it out of the skin. You don't have to peel it.
Yeah. If you're gonna marinate one chicken breast, what
Exactly.
doesn't really at that point? It's very easy. So, another good one that I think people forget about is bread. Keeping bread in your freezer actually keeps it fresher tasting and less likely to get kind of stale and just sort of off flavored than putting it in the refrigerator. So I mean, maybe now that it's cooled off, it's not as much of a concern for some people, but bread in my house gets moldy so much faster in the summer, so I always keep it in the freezer. And if you are making lunches with bread, with sandwich bread, you can go ahead and take that frozen bread out the night before, make your sandwich, while the bread's still frozen, stick it in your fridge for the next day, and it's going to be thawed and ready to go. You don't even have to slow down. Some people, you can even make your own Uncrustable if you're a peanut butter and jelly fan. So you just have to put the peanut butter on both sides so the jelly doesn't seep through, because it'll make your bread soggy. But you can make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and stick them in the freezer. So there's all kinds of things you can do with bread as well. Fresh produce, we talked a little bit about berries. I take chili peppers, just rinse them off whole and stick those in the freezer, because generally you don't care really about how the texture holds up with like a jalapeno. But some peppers too, if you're gonna cook them, you can just pop those in the freezer. Some things it's better to blanch, like green beans. But really, most fruits and vegetables can be frozen in some way. I have frozen tomato sauce and applesauce before. So those are other options too. I've also heard of people using frozen apples in baked goods, or making baked apples with an apple that you got in the
A
freezer.
bunch of tomatoes one year,
Yeah.
and we made tomato sauce and froze them.
Yep. And you can do like roast tomato sauce too, so you're not spending all because then you kind of want that skin on it, so you're not spending all this time peeling tomatoes. So So those are all things that can go in the freezer. There's more. I think that first slide where it says just about anything can be frozen is pretty accurate. It's just a matter of how. And if you have questions, particular items that you're curious about, let me know. I don't know if there's anything you guys are interested in freezing that you want to talk about. I'm going to go through some more examples, but.
Do you think like one of those seal meal things are better than just,
Like the bags that
you know, the one that like seals it so no
okay,
air
like
can get in at all?
If you're going to be doing a lot of it, it might be worth investing in. My in-laws have one. I've never used one though. Because I prefer that spreading things out on the
Right.
cookie sheet and having it freeze very quickly all around.
Mm.
Once it's sealed up like that, yes, no air is going to get in, so it will do kind of a similar approach, but to me it's one more step. So, but I also think it depends. I think that works if you're, and if you're into sous vide cooking, then absolutely, it's probably worth the investment. Now, sous vide is basically you cook things to a very exact temperature in a sealed up plastic container in a water bath. So it's very trendy. Most people are not doing it. So, but if you were, then I think that would make sense because you can just put the bags in and set it to whatever the temperature that you need it to get to, and you're good to go. Actually, we're going to go right ahead to the next slide. This one's going to have the loaf of bread. We talked a little bit about this, where you can put a loaf of bread in the fridge and take slices out as you need. A few seconds in the microwave if you're in a hurry, but really it only takes a couple hours to thaw on your counter. So, and you can actually stick it in your toaster for frozen. That's not going to be a problem. So if you're just making toast, that's easy. And this will keep your bread fresher. So go ahead and purchase that really nice looking loaf at the farmer's market, without worrying about it. I'm going to go ahead to the next slide. This one has some English muffins on it. So I talked a bit about this, where you can make breakfast sandwiches and wrap them up real tight, stick them in your freezer. I've also done this with breakfast burritos. One of the tricks I like to do with this is to, when I cook the eggs, go ahead and cook some veggies into it. So I'm sneaking that into my breakfast in the morning. So whatever you like, mushrooms, spinach, just scramble those in with your eggs or your little omelet, and you can make a little breakfast sandwich that you can microwave or probably preferably put in the toaster oven. Okay, here's another one. We talked a bit about freezing vegetables. You can go ahead and freeze greens. There's a couple ways you can do that. You could just stick them in a plastic bag like you see here, or you could puree them up with a little water and put them in ice cube trays. These are great for smoothies. Yeah. But I would go with the more simple approach, then you don't have to decide in advance what you're going to use your greens for. Because you can still put it in a smoothie when it's out of the bag like that. So, frozen food safety. You want to keep things at like 0 degrees Fahrenheit. You want it very cold. Freezing will prevent the growth of microorganisms that can cause spoilage and foodborne illness. So that's really helpful that way. Freshness and quality at the time of freezing, though, will affect the condition of the frozen food. So basically, it will prevent the growth of these microorganisms, but it won't outright kill them. It just kind of stops them. So if your stuff has been on the counter, or I'm going to say on the counter, has been in your fridge for a day, you're freezing something day old, and when you take it out, you're not starting at 0, you're starting at 1 day. So it kind of elaborates a little bit more on that. Freezing inactivates the microphone. Once food's thawed, it can become active again and multiply. So you're basically, if it's multiplied to 16, that's where you're starting with. So the next thing it's going to be is whatever 16 squared is. Some things to keep in mind. Oops. So frozen foods, nutrients are not destroyed by freezing. To an extent, some things that you purchased frozen might actually have more nutrients in them because they are processed so quickly and frozen so quickly, as opposed to something that is shipped across the country and then sits on the shelves for a few days and then moves to sitting on your shelves at home or in your refrigerator. There's also enzymatic activity. So these are enzymes that can lead to your food basically starting to break down on its own. So this deterioration of food quality as a result. Freezing will slow this activity, but it does not stop it completely. That's why sometimes when you get into that bag of frozen green beans that have been in there for like a year, they're brown now. They don't look as fresh and bright anymore. So how to store leftovers. You want to get things out of the danger zone as quickly as possible. Typically within 2 hours is ideal. So that means getting them below 40 degrees. When you want to get them in your refrigerator, you want to get them cool if you're going to be storing them, or keeping them above 140 degrees. So that's why when you go to like a buffet, periodically you'll see somebody come and temp things. They want to make sure that the cold food's below 40 and hot food's above 140. Yeah, because once something's out in between that range, for more than 2 hours, you're looking at issues with potential spoilage. So I want to, I'll wait a little bit to get to more on how to store. After a meal, you want to get, like I said, you want to get things in the refrigerator within 2 hours. Store it in clean containers, food grade containers. I don't know what's going on with these. And when ready to eat again, you want to reheat to 165 degrees. So, during the time between you finishing your meal and getting the leftovers into the fridge, there will be microbial activity of some kind. So that 165 will help to kill off some of that. So that's what we're aiming for. As much as we're all used to the cold pizza, it's probably not the best idea in terms of food safety. But we've all done it before and lived to tell the tale. That doesn't mean there isn't a risk. Okay, so here's more on food safety and chilling your food. Generally things are safe in the fridge for 3 to 4 days and safe frozen, but recommended that you use within 6 months. 2 to 6 months, really, depending upon what it is. Leftover meat cuts into smaller pieces. Now this just helps it cool faster. You want to store things in separate containers. Again, will help it cool faster. Put things in some kind of cooler for any kind of travel. I think if you're lucky enough to be able to go from your refrigerator at home to your refrigerator at work pretty quickly, then you might not need to go overboard with this. But, if you're going to be traveling for a little while or you don't have a refrigerator at work, it's probably good to have an ice pack in there. And you want to reheat thoroughly to that 165. And I think this is kind of the key piece, because we all do the sniff test, or if it tastes fine, it's probably fine. Not necessarily. The things that cause foodborne illness cannot be smelled or tasted. That doesn't mean that you should eat things that smell or taste bad if they fit within this range for safety. Don't eat that. There could still be something happening. But, they can both be there at the same time. So just be cautious. Use good practices with food safety. So here's some things that you can freeze for and for how long. So I know we talked about how eggs can be a bit difficult to freeze. Egg whites you can actually freeze very easily. Just put them in the freezer in a container. The egg yolks are the challenge. So egg substitutes also work. I think people forget that you can freeze deli meat, which can be very convenient. If a product that you like goes on sale, you could go ahead and portion that out and freeze it. When I saw this, the one thing that stood out was that poultry in different portions and parts and things like that have different shelf lives, but when I think about it, it does make sense. There's gonna be more enzyme activity in the giblets, because that's where they would have been made. So these are all things that can be frozen, and for how long. Some more items. Again, we go back to the eggs. Fresh in the shell. You're not going to put them in the freezer. But they'll last a little while in your fridge, 3 to 5 weeks. It says. Hard cooked. Again, they don't freeze well. Egg substitutes. If it's open, probably isn't going to freeze well. This next piece right here, where it talks to these deli salads, all of these are going to have mayonnaise in it, which contains eggs, which means it's going to be a challenge to freeze. Mayonnaise will separate from the freezing. The emulsification that they get from the eggs kind of breaks down. So it's not going to result in a great product. Now, if you wanted to go ahead and freeze components of one of these salads, like the pasta and chicken or whatever, or ham, that would probably work, but you want to skip the mayonnaise. I think everyone knows that hot dogs freeze well, bacon and sausage freeze just fine. Okay. So here's some other things and how well they freeze. So ground beef, I think it's worth looking at what the ground products only last 1 or 2 days in your refrigerator versus 3 to 5 with the whole item. There's just more surface area at that point for, and the processing, more potential for contamination, so you really want to use those quickly. You know, chicken and turkey, I think we know that will go in the freezer for a good chunk of time. Seafood is an interesting one to talk about, because I think around here, the idea of frozen seafood is a little bit like, no, I prefer fresh. But there's parts of the country where people really can't get fresh seafood, and they're still serving sushi in Chicago. You know, they're doing it somehow, and a lot of times for food safety, moving these things frozen makes the most sense. And with that IQF, with that individually quick frozen approach, we can get things frozen quicker and less likely to have it affect the quality of the food. They typically do it right on the boat. So, okay. Some things I wanted to add about food safety. Right now I think people are going to a lot of blogs and finding this kind of process of meal prepping and having things ready in your freezer to move to, you know, a sheet pan, a slow cooker, an Instant Pot, but there are some safety issues around that. So in general, I don't think anybody's trying to stick something frozen on a sheet, from a bag to a sheet pan into their oven. I think they know to thaw it better. It's also not going to kind of come out right. It'll probably dry out whatever meat protein you have in there. So again, that is something where it makes sense to thaw it first. When it comes to the slow cooker, in terms of food safety, you want to make sure that everything is thawed before you put it in a slow cooker. Because the slow cooker does not get hot enough to get you from that, out of that danger zone quick enough to get you to that 140 degrees within that 2-hour span, if it's frozen. If you're starting from something that's chilled, that's fine, but when it comes to the slow cooker, you do not want to go from frozen to the slow cooker for food safety. And some people even will prep things in their slow cooker in that big heavy ceramic and stick that in the fridge and then put it out the next day. Prep into a different container than the one you're going to cook in, particularly that heavy ceramic. It's going to take a while for that to heat up enough too, to actually start cooking your food. So I would encourage thawing things before you put them in a slow cooker and not putting the components of your slow cooker into the refrigerator for food safety. With an Instant Pot or other pressure cooker, those heat up quickly enough from the pressure to allow you to cook directly from frozen. So that's a safer approach that way. So if you have one of those, it's okay to go follow the instructions of freezer to slow cook to cooker to pressure cooker, but not with a slow cooker. So I think that's something that's important to know. So I'm sorry this keeps coming. I just really don't know how the system works.
Is a slow cooker the same as a crock pot?
Yeah, that's a
Oh.
crock
Okay, thank you.
pot. You know, the crock pot is generally safe and a great way to cook. You can put things in before you go to bed or before you leave for work and have it ready when you need them. Some people swear by doing things overnight and then reheating it too. So if you're somebody who like the idea of leaving something hot going while you're gone, which I kind of makes me nervous. I have 2 dogs at home. I don't want them to get hurt. You know, doing it overnight while you're there and can react should an emergency happen. Also, if it's a big stew, everything knows that it's always better a little longer later. Once it's cooled and reheated, which, you know, there's food safety things you have to be careful about. You want to get that chilled quickly, but still. Okay. All right, so anything about what we talked about with food safety and shelf life? Anybody?
The charts
Okay.
are good.
What's that?
The charts are good here. Gives me good
Yeah.
reference.
Well, I'm going to give you another option. So there's so in case you lose this or you leave it here and don't have it at home where you need to look at it in the refrigerator over the weekend, you can also download this app called Food Keeper. It's from the USDA. So it helps you understand how long things can wait in your refrigerator. It also reminds you of the cooking temperatures for safety. So it's, I mean, even for me, I've taken tests on this stuff, and I probably couldn't tell you exactly what the numbers are for every food in the world. So I have this on my phone. It also, it can, if there's any question, you can kind of go to a reference here. So this is something worth looking into. It is from the USDA, so it's reliable information. It's not just anybody putting this together. Okay, so benefits of using your freezer. It's convenient. I think we can all, when done right, it's convenient, particularly if it's like a frozen meal that you've either made yourself or you've purchased. It's just quick and easy. It makes food quick to prepare. Extends the shelf life of your food. It allows you to budget, like what you're doing with the squash. You get a whole bunch of it and cook it all at once, get it in your freezer. You're making soup and pies all winter long. It's great. You can portion things that way. So like what I said about cutting up your casserole, slicing up portions, moving those to the freezer. There's also, you could do a lot with muffin tins too. So you could cook like a casserole or some meatloaf, for example, in a muffin tin, and then it's portioned out to a smaller portion that you can take as you go. This also works for like mini frittatas, for breakfast. So there's lots you could do in the muffin tin, and then the internet is full of ideas. Don't be afraid to check those out. I will tell you this week, I've had a very busy week, a lot of late nights, and I like to get my kids fed before 6, which is very challenging when I'm getting home at 5:20 on an early night. So we've been going through some of the things I've had in the freezer, thawing it during the day, sticking it in the freezer. I have an Instant Pot. I had a stew that I prepped right in a container that I was able to just dump into the Instant Pot and turn on. It also means I can leave very simple instructions too for whoever's going to finish the meal, like, an hour cover, take off.
Right.
It's very, because you can write them typically right on whatever you've frozen them in, and it's very easy for whoever is actually finishing the job. And for yourself too, I don't have to think about it. I just go grab something, stick it in the oven, stick it in the Instant Pot, and we're done. So I know a lot of these things work for me and my family. So benefits for prepackaged foods. Are you guys, okay, who has something in the freezer here? Anybody? Or in their freezer at home?
Prepackaged.
Yeah, like a lean cuisine or something like that.
No, the only thing we get, there's this fish that we get.
Is it one of those fish
It's
kits?
a breaded fish, but it's not like
Oh, okay.
Van Camp or, you know what I mean? It's really good fish,
Good
we like it a
quality.
lot. But otherwise than that, we don't really,
Yeah. I mean, when I had an office job, there was always I usually.
my
I
husband's
handle
really
it.
good about
Basic.
eating leftovers.
Yeah.
When I wouldn't eat them because they passed the Wendy date, he'll eat them.
Yeah, the April date and the date my husband have are different.
2 different days,
And
entirely.
mine will, you know, if he wants to take the risk, okay. I won't let it go too far. But definitely not my kids, because I'm the one who gets called.
Because he doesn't, my husband doesn't remember. He'll go, didn't we just have that? I'm like, we had it last week. It smells good, well then you eat it, I'm not.
My recommendation is one of those magnets that holds pens,
Yeah,
a dry erase
oh
pens
yeah.
that's supposed to go on a dry erase board. You can
Yeah.
stick one of those in your refrigerator.
Ah,
So you've got a pen ready to go, and you can mark things as it goes in. And the dry erase will come off easy, so if you use a dry erase, won't work on every material, but it's better than nothing. A piece of tape always works too, though. So you don't need to buy a label maker. You can tape it out. So just a marker, some tape will work. So yeah, freezer meals can be really convenient. And we'll talk about some best ways to utilize them. So I'm not going to say stop and only eat stuff that you slaved in the kitchen on. There's things we can do with freezer meals. So they're good for portion control. They're always available. You can get a lot of variety. So if you're meal prepping and freezing a bunch of things, you're probably going to make 3 of the same item, not, you know, a different dish for every day of the week for yourself, for every meal. It's, for 30 days, it's 90 different items. So I think we'll all run out of ideas that way. There's going to be less food waste. In general, people can finish one of these. There's going to be packaging waste. So that's something, if that's a concern of yours, something to keep in mind. And you know what you're getting, too. So, because they have the nutrition facts labels and the ingredients typically listed. But we can go over some kind of rules to follow. So for choosing the meals, look for between 350 and 500 calories. Maybe a little bit more or a little bit less depending upon how you're using it. But this is a pretty good range. Fats, you want to avoid saturated fat. I don't have regular whole, total fat up here. It's really the saturated fat that you want to watch for. And look for things that don't contain trans fats. Now, something can say 0 trans fats and still have some, so look for the phrase partially hydrogenated oil. And these more shelf-stable items are where you typically do find, I don't want to say shelf-stable because they're not really shelf-stable, but these, packaged prepared foods are really where you're going to find trans fats. You want to look for the phrase partially hydrogenated oil. If that's on there, it contains trans fats. Sodium, aim for less than 600 milligrams of sodium. Now this to me seems high, but I have to remind myself this is a whole meal. If you're looking for something that's going to end up being an ingredient in your meal, I would recommend something much lower, because the sodium adds up very quickly. But it's the whole meal, so it's not quite as detrimental in that. Not detrimental. It doesn't quite take as much of a dent out of your sodium budget for the day. Protein, 14 to 21 grams of protein. If it's going to be lower than that, go ahead and add like a Greek yogurt for your dessert or something, too, to kind of round out the dish. Fiber, aim for 5 grams per entree. Again, though, if it's hard for you to find something that reaches that, a side salad can kind of help you get a little bit more fiber. So, and you're also going to want to avoid things with added sugars and a very long ingredient list. So that can be telling in and of itself. Oh, and you want to complete your meal, which I'll talk about some things you can add to. So here's some brands that are generally pretty good. I've also been seeing some newer items coming on the shelves. So Amy's Kitchen, Lean Cuisine, Cedar Lane, Peace of Mind, Weight Watchers, Smart Ones, Dr. Prager's, all good products. Eating Well, the magazine, has been putting some of their recipes in freezer meals. So those are also generally pretty good. And I keep seeing more and more new ones. So if the store you shop at has a Guiding Stars program, if you see Guiding Stars on it, it's generally a good place to start too. So here's another example of this. And I think I'll point out, this probably looks smaller than what you would have put in a container. It definitely looks smaller than what you get at the Chinese restaurant, takeout. So we're going to talk about, kind of rounding out that meal a little bit. So some things to consider: adding that side salad, having it with a glass of milk or like a Greek yogurt for dessert. If you're looking at the meal and you think it could use a little bit more of this, if there's some kind of food group that you think might be missing, typically it's going to be fruit. These never come with serving of fruit. So go ahead and have orange, apple, half a banana, some whatever fruit you like with it. That's not going to add a lot of calories, but it will kind of help round out the nutrition component and fill you up. Some other things to consider are just kind of snacking vegetables, so like celery sticks, carrots, snap peas, cherry tomatoes, things like that. You can have alongside. Okay. So that's everything for now. I guess in summary, using your freezer, you can really make it work for you. There's the internet is full of recipes and ideas. Eating Well magazine, I know I mentioned them already, they have a whole series of soups you can do, pre-prepped, where you just add broth and put it in your slow cooker or Instant Pot. If you do the slow cooker though, you will want to freeze it. And I'm pretty sure you will want to thaw it first. And I want to say that their website does explain that very clearly. So that's a good one. There's lots of recipes for marinades that work in the freezer. I've used some off of The Kitchen, which is spelled without an E in the past, so those are some good resources. As well as Pinch of Yum has a whole bunch of freezer meals. That's another blog where they try to be a bit healthier. Now, Eating Well staffs dietitians, so you can really rely on them. But there's other things, and I think, you can tell when something's is a healthier choice than others. I would say if it calls for a can of cream of anything soup, it's probably not a good choice in terms of your health, because that's going to have a lot of fat, probably trans fats, definitely a lot of sodium. So there's lots of great ideas out there, great techniques. So I say have fun with this. Now's the time of year to do it, because we're at the end of season for a lot of produce and at the beginning of kind of the fall season produce. So, and it's more fun to be in the kitchen now too, because it's kind of cooled off. So you don't really want to be in your kitchen roasting this before you freeze it or blanching this. It's too, in the middle of summer, it's too hot. So now's a really good time to kind of tuck these things away. It's also just a busier time of year coming up. There's, even if there's holidays on the way, even if you don't have someone in your life going back to school, for some reason everybody's life gets busier in September. So before that really picks up, it's a good time to kind of take on these sort of food projects. There are food safety concerns, so that Foodkeeper app would be a great choice when I'm not around. So that's something to consider, and just watch the food safety piece. Make sure everything's washed before you go in, and be adventurous. Try new things with the freezer. It can do a lot for you, like I said. And I don't think anybody thought about putting peanut butter and jelly sandwich in the freezer, but it can save you a lot of time when you don't have a lunch ready. You didn't have time to make a lunch the day before. So, any questions?
In your travels, especially on food storage, are standalone freezers coming back into vogue, or is it pretty much just a freezer either on the top or the bottom of your fridge?
So I think if you're doing a lot of this, or chest freezers are definitely becoming popular again because people are buying meat as sides.
Right.
So you're buying like an eighth or a quarter quarter, half of a steer.
Mm.
Right.
And that's going to take up a lot of space. That's not going to work in a French door refrigerator, which is a little space. So, and those are going to keep things colder more consistently. So a big deep chest freezer is a great choice if you're going to be doing a lot of freezer. You're going to keep a lot in your freezer. My approach is unopened packages go in the freezer. But if I have that loaf of bread is going to go in the freezer. I'm going to go in the big chest freezer, the unopened stuff. That loaf of bread that I'm starting to pick slices out of, that goes in the freezer upstairs. The remaining half bag of peas, that goes in the freezer upstairs.
Okay.
But the other stuff stays downstairs where it stays cooler, and I just cycle things through.
Okay.
I love mashed biscuits. And I have purchased meat, like, in large volume before, so it's really helpful for me in that regard. I've also frozen large amounts of things, so right now I'm pretty sure I have like 3 soup kits. And multiple bags of meat marinating for easy meals. So I definitely, if this is something you're going to do, if you have a lot of people to feed, or if you do a lot of entertaining, it's definitely worthwhile. Don't think it's absolutely necessary though. But they can be very efficient, and they're very thick around the outside. They keep a good seal. You don't open and close it the same way you would the one in your house. You're not reaching in for ice.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Anything from our remote offices, if we can figure out how to unmute and mute? Okay, I think they're good. All right, well, thank you guys.